There is a sound a king makes when he dies. Not the sound of his last breath, though I heard that too, a wet wheeze through punctured lungs, but the sound of everything he represents collapsing, the crash of steel on bone, the thunder of hooves in retreat, the roar of men who smell victory turning to screams of men who know they are defeated. I have heard that sound. I heard it on August 22nd, in the year of our Lord 1485, standing in a field near Market Bosworth, watching my king die in the mud. They say a man's true nature reveals itself at the moment of his death. I do not know if this is true, but I know that Richard Plantagenet, third of that name and last true king of England, died fighting, not fleeing, not begging, fighting, with his bare head exposed to the sky and his sword in his hand and his enemies circling like wolves. That is what I saw. That is what I will carry until my own death comes for me. I am Thomas Ferrers, squire in the service of His Majesty King Richard III. For 2 years I have stood in his household, polished his armour, held his horse, watched him move through the great halls of Westminster and Nottingham with the weight of a crown that never seemed to fit quite right. I am 23 years old. I have been trained in arms since childhood, educated by priests who taught me to read Latin and understand the Holy Scriptures, raised to serve the nobility with absolute loyalty. Today, I stand in his retinue, wearing borrowed plate armor that pinches my shoulders, holding a sword I have never used to kill a man. Around me, 8,000 soldiers prepare for battle. Across the field, perhaps 5,000 men march under the banners of Henry Tudor, a Welshman with French backing and a dubious claim to the throne. Between us, the Stanley brothers watch from a hillside with their own army, waiting to see which way the wind blows before they commit. That morning, I wake before dawn to the sound of men vomiting. The field smells of shit and sweat and fear. We have camped on open ground near the village of Sutton Cheney, and the August night has been warm and airless. I slept perhaps 2 hours, startled awake each time by the sounds of horses or distant shouting, or my own racing heart. Now, in the grey light before sunrise, I help the other squires prepare the knight's armour. My hands shake as I fasten buckles and check straps. Sir Edmund Willoughby, whose armour I am tending, notices my trembling fingers. "First battle?" he asks. "Yes, my lord. Stay close to the standards. Don't run unless everyone runs. And if you pray, pray that the Stanleys choose the right side." He does not say which side is the right side. He does not need to. By the time the sun rises, the whole army is assembled. I can see the king now, mounted on his white courser, wearing his crown over his helmet. The crown gleams in the early light, gold circlets studded with gems, impossible to miss. Some of the men whisper that it is madness to wear it into battle, that it makes him a target. But Richard wants everyone to know who leads this army. He wants Henry Tudor to see him coming. The morning is bright and warm. The sky is cloudless. The Leicestershire plain stretches around us, green fields broken by marsh and woodland. To our right, a low ridge crowned with a windmill. To our left, the marshy ground near Ambion Hill. The enemy assembles perhaps half a mile away, their banners bright against the grass. I can make out the Red Dragon of Wales, the banner of John de Vere, Earl of Oxford. I cannot see Henry Tudor himself. He is too well protected, too far back. Then the cannons roar. The sound is like the earth splitting open. I feel it in my chest, in my bones, a concussive shock that makes my ears ring. Smoke billows across the field. The Royal Artillery, 3 or 4 iron serpentines hauled into position during the night, opens fire on the advancing enemy. I cannot see where the shots land, but I hear distant screams. The smell of gunpowder washes over us, acrid and sulphurous, catching in my throat. My horse dances nervously beneath me, and I struggle to control him. "Steady," I whisper, though I do not know if I am speaking to the horse or to myself. The enemy does not break. They keep advancing, and now their own artillery answers. I hear the whistle of a cannonball overhead, a sound like tearing cloth, and then an explosion somewhere behind me. Men scream. A horse bolts through the ranks, riderless, its flank torn open and streaming blood. The Earl of Oxford leads his vanguard forward, angling to the left to avoid the worst of the marsh. They are perhaps 3,000 strong, men-at-arms in plate armor, pikemen with long halberds, archers with longbows. They form a wedge and drive toward our right flank, where the Duke of Norfolk commands our vanguard. I see the moment of impact from perhaps 200 yards away. The two formations collide like waves breaking against rocks. The crash is deafening, metal on metal, the screams of men and horses, the splintering of lance shafts. The entire mass heaves and surges. Bright surcoats disappear into the press of bodies. Horses rear and fall. Men go down and do not rise. I had seen Richard angry before. 3 months passed. When word reached us that Henry Tudor had landed in Wales, the king summoned his commanders to Nottingham Castle. I was present in the great hall, standing against the wall with the other squires, watching the lords argue about where to meet the invasion. "He has French troops," Lord Stanley said, his voice careful and measured. "Perhaps 2,000 mercenaries, and he marches through Wales recruiting as he goes." "Then we crush him before he grows stronger," Richard snapped. He stood at the head of the long oak table, still wearing his riding clothes, mud on his boots. His face was pale, his jaw tight. "Every day we wait, more men flock to his banners. Every day we delay, he looks stronger and we look weaker." "Your Majesty has the larger army," Norfolk said. "We can afford to choose our ground." "Can we?" Richard's voice was sharp. He looked directly at Lord Stanley. "Can we trust that the men who swear loyalty today will stand with us tomorrow?" The hall fell silent. Stanley's face showed nothing, but I saw his knuckles whiten on the edge of the table. "I have served the crown faithfully for 30 years, Stanley said quietly. "You have served yourself," Richard replied. "As all men do. I do not blame you for it, but I will not pretend to trust what I cannot verify." He turned away, dismissing them all with a gesture. Later, I learned that Richard kept Stanley's son, Lord Strange, as a hostage to ensure the father's good behavior. It did not work. Or perhaps it worked too well. Stanley stayed neutral, which was the same as betrayal, but that was then. Now, standing on this battlefield, with the sun climbing higher and the air thick with smoke and screams, I watch the fighting rage around Norfolk's position. The vanguards are locked together, neither side giving ground. Men hack at each other with swords and axes. Arrows arc overhead, falling into the press with wet thunks. The smell of blood reaches me now, metallic and thick, mixing with the smell of churned earth and horse sweat. Richard sits on his horse perhaps 50 yards ahead of me, surrounded by his household knights. He is watching the battle, his crowned head turning as he scans the field. I can see his gauntleted hand gripping his sword hilt. He is calculating, measuring, waiting for the moment to commit his reserves. Then I see him stiffen. He is looking across the field, past the fighting, toward a small cluster of banners on the far side, Henry Tudor's personal guard. Perhaps 100 men, maybe less, protecting the pretender. They are isolated, separated from Oxford's main force by the angle of the fighting. Richard turns to his knights. I am close enough to hear his voice. "There," he says, pointing with his sword. "There is the dragon. Cut off the head, and the body dies." "Your Majesty, it is too far," someone begins. "It is close enough to reach," Richard interrupts. "And it is our best chance. Oxford's men are engaged. The Stanleys sit and watch. But if we kill Henry Tudor now, this ends. The rebellion dies with him." He does not wait for agreement. He spurs his white courser forward, and his household knights follow. I hesitate for only a heartbeat. Then I follow too. We are perhaps 80 riders, mounted men-at-arms in full plate, the flower of Richard's household. We break into a canter, then a gallop. The ground blurs beneath me. My horse's hooves pound the earth in rhythm with my heart. The wind tears at my face. I can hear Richard ahead of me, shouting something, though the words are lost in the thunder of hooves. His white horse is faster than mine, pulling ahead. His crown catches the sunlight, a golden beacon leading us forward. We cut across the field at an angle, avoiding the worst of the fighting. Men scatter in front of us. I see faces turn toward us in shock. Enemy soldiers realizing that the king himself is charging. Some try to form a line, but we smash through them. A pikeman thrusts at me, and I bat the weapon aside with my shield, feeling the impact jolt up my arm. My horse tramples something soft, and I do not look down. Then we are through, racing toward Henry's banners. I can see them clearly now, the red dragon, the white and green of Tudor. I can see the men around him, faces turning toward us, weapons coming up. Richard is perhaps 20 yards ahead of me, his sword raised. He is shouting something. A battle cry, maybe, or a prayer. We hit Tudor's guard like a thunderbolt. The impact throws men backward. I see Richard's sword rise and fall, rise and fall. Blood sprays across his white surcoat. His horse rears and strikes with its hooves. William Brandon, carrying Henry's standard, goes down under the king's blade, the dragon banner falling into the mud. For a moment, one impossible, perfect moment, it seems like we will reach him. Henry Tudor is right there, perhaps 10 yards from Richard, his face pale with terror. Richard spurs his horse forward, cutting down another man. The path is almost clear. Then everything changes. The sound comes first. A roar from our left, from the hillside where the Stanleys have been watching. I turn and see them coming, thousands of fresh troops in bright armor, charging down the slope directly at us. Sir William Stanley's forces, held in reserve throughout the battle, now committed fully. But they are not attacking Henry Tudor. They are attacking us. Treason! Richard's voice cuts through the chaos, raw with fury and disbelief. Treason! The word echoes in my ears. I see it now. We are surrounded. Oxford's men pressing from one side, Tudor's guard rallying in front, and now Stanley's army crashing into our flank and rear. We are perhaps 80 men caught in the jaws of a trap. Richard does not flee. He spurs his horse deeper into the enemy, still trying to reach Henry, still believing he can end this with one stroke. But his white courser stumbles in the marshy ground, its hooves losing purchase in the soft earth. The horse goes down on its knees, throwing Richard forward. He manages to stay in the saddle, but the momentum is broken. Stanley's men are on us now. I parry a sword strike, feel my arm go numb from the impact. Someone screams behind me. A horse collides with mine and we both stagger. I am turned around, disoriented, no longer sure which direction is safety. I see Richard perhaps 30 yards away. His horse is stuck in the marsh, thrashing. He has dismounted, standing knee-deep in muddy water. His sword is in his hand. Around him, his household knights are dying. Sir Richard Ratcliffe goes down under a halberd strike. Sir Robert Brackenbury is pulled from his horse by 3 men with hooks. Richard fights on. Even from this distance, I can see the fierce determination in his movements. He parries a strike, counters with a cut that opens a man's throat. But there are too many. They circle him, pressing closer. Halberds and poleaxes rise and fall. I try to reach him. I drive my horse forward, but a wall of Stanley's men blocks my path. A halberd hooks my shield and tears it from my arm. Another blow glances off my shoulder plate, and I feel something crack inside the armor. Pain shoots through my chest. "Fall back!" someone shouts. "Fall back to the standards!" But I cannot fall back. The king is there, surrounded, fighting for his life. I am his squire. My duty is to die at his side if necessary. Then my horse is hit. A pike thrust into its neck. The animal screams, a sound I will hear in nightmares, and collapses. I am thrown clear, hitting the ground hard enough to drive the air from my lungs. For a moment, I cannot breathe, cannot see, cannot think. When my vision clears, I am lying in mud and blood, my armor half crushed, men fighting all around me. I struggle to my knees. My sword is gone, lost somewhere in the fall. I can barely move inside my dented armor. Through the press of bodies, I see Richard still standing. His helmet is gone now, knocked off or torn away. His bare head is visible, hair plastered to his skull with sweat and blood. He is surrounded by perhaps a dozen men, all pressing in with weapons raised. I remember the first time I saw the king up close. It was 2 years ago, shortly after he took the throne. I had been assigned to his household through my father's connections, minor nobility, enough to get a position but not enough to matter. I was nervous, terrified of making a mistake. Richard was in his private chamber, being fitted for new armor. I was there to hold tools for the armorer. The king stood in his shirt and hose, arms outstretched, while the craftsman took measurements. I tried not to stare, but I noticed the way his spine curved slightly, one shoulder higher than the other, the scoliosis that his enemies mocked and his supporters ignored. "You are the Ferrers boy," Richard said suddenly, catching me watching. I nearly dropped the hammer I was holding. "Yes, Your Majesty. Your father served my brother Edward at Barnet." "Yes, Your Majesty. He died there." "I remember him. He held the line when others broke." Richard studied me for a moment. "Loyalty is worth more than gold, boy. Remember that. A man who stands when others flee is worth 10 who fight only when victory is certain." The armorer cleared his throat, and Richard turned back to the fitting. But I never forgot those words. Loyalty is worth more than gold. A man who stands when others flee. Now, lying in the mud of Bosworth Field, I understand what he meant. Richard could flee, he could surrender, he could beg for mercy. Instead, he fights, because he is the king, and kings do not run. I watch him swing his sword at a man with a halberd, the blade catching the shaft and knocking it aside. But another halberd comes from behind, the spike punching into his back. Richard staggers, but does not fall. He spins, slashing at his attacker, and I see blood streaming down his face from a cut on his scalp. The sound is terrible, not the clash of weapons, but the wet, meaty sounds of blades finding flesh, the gasps and grunts of men fighting hand to hand, the screams of the wounded, and above it all, the constant roar of thousands of voices, men shouting orders, crying for help, screaming in pain or triumph. Richard goes down on one knee. A sword strike catches his shoulder, skids off the plate armor. He drives his own blade upward into someone's groin, and the man falls away shrieking. But there are too many. A halberd descends in a vicious arc, and I hear the crack of the blade striking his skull. Richard's head snaps sideways. Blood sprays. He tries to rise, one hand braced against the ground, the other still gripping his sword. Another blow falls, and another. I cannot see clearly through the press of bodies, but I see him collapse forward into the mud. The circle of men closes around him, weapons rising and falling with mechanical rhythm. Then it stops. The men step back. Richard Plantagenet, by the grace of God, King of England, lies face down in the marsh. Blood pools around him, mixing with water and mud. His white surcoat is torn and stained. His crown has fallen somewhere in the fighting. I cannot see it. For a moment, there is almost silence. The fighting around his position has stopped. Men stand panting, staring down at the body. Then someone raises a cheer, and it spreads like fire through the enemy ranks. "The tyrant is dead! The tyrant is dead!" I want to scream. I want to charge forward and kill every man who struck him. But I cannot move. My armor is too damaged, my body too battered. I can only watch as they surround his corpse, as they begin stripping the armor from his body. Around me, Richard's army is dissolving. Men throw down their weapons and flee. The vanguard, where Norfolk fought so bravely, has collapsed. I learn later that Norfolk himself is dead, killed somewhere near the windmill. The Stanley forces pursue the fleeing soldiers, cutting them down as they run. I manage to drag myself behind a dead horse, using the carcass as cover. Men run past me, some friend, some foe, none paying attention to a wounded squire lying in the mud. I press my face against the cooling flesh of the horse and try to breathe through the pain in my chest. The battle is over. We have lost. The king is dead. The Plantagenet dynasty, which has ruled England for more than 300 years, has ended in a muddy field in Leicestershire. I must have lost consciousness, because when I open my eyes again, the sun is higher. The sounds of battle have moved away, replaced by the moans of the wounded and the harsh calls of carrion birds already gathering. I try to sit up and the pain makes me gasp. A face appears above me, a man in Tudor livery, sword in hand. I wait for the killing blow. "Can you walk?" he asks. I manage to nod. "Then get up. Wounded are being taken to the village. Stay here and you'll die when night comes." He moves on, looking for others. I struggle to my feet, every movement agony. My armor is ruined, several plates bent or cracked. I manage to unbuckle the worst of it, letting pieces fall to the ground. Underneath, my shirt is soaked with sweat and blood. I cannot tell if it is mine or someone else's. I stumble across the battlefield. It looks like a slaughterhouse. Bodies everywhere, twisted in the postures of violent death. Horses lying on their sides, intestines spilled across the grass. Broken weapons, torn banners, pieces of armor scattered like seed. The smell is overwhelming, blood and shit, and the beginning stink of death in August heat. Then I see them. A group of men near where Richard fell, surrounding something on the ground. As I get closer, I realize what they are doing. They have stripped Richard's body completely naked. His pale corpse lies in the mud, covered in wounds. I count at least 9 separate cuts on his head and skull, deep gashes from swords and halberds and daggers. His face is barely recognizable, matted with blood and dirt. There are other wounds on his back and arms, places where blades found gaps in his armor before it was removed. 2 men lift the body and drape it across a horse's back like a slaughtered deer. Richard's arms and legs hang down on either side, swaying with the horse's movement. His head lolls, blood dripping from his mouth and wounds. Someone has tied a rope around his torso to keep the corpse from falling. I remember another moment, 6 months before the battle. Spring, when the world was green and the court was at Westminster. Queen Anne had been dead barely a week, and already the rumours were spreading that Richard had poisoned her to marry his own niece, Elizabeth of York. I was in the corridor outside the king's chamber when I heard shouting. The door was partially open. I should have moved away, but I was young and curious and stupid. I listened. "They say you murdered her." That was Richard's voice, raw with grief and fury. "They say I murdered my own wife to pursue some depraved scheme. Anne, who was my friend since childhood. Anne, who stood by me when others fled." "Your Majesty must ignore these lies," someone replied. I thought it was Sir Richard Ratcliffe. "The people who spread them are your enemies. They seek to undermine." "I loved her," Richard's voice broke. "I loved her, and she is dead, and they make me into a monster. What must I do to prove I am not the villain they paint me?" There was no answer. What could anyone say? The rumors had already spread too far, poisoned too many minds. Richard had become, in his enemies' telling, a creature of pure ambition, murderer of his nephews, murderer of his wife, a hunchbacked tyrant who seized a crown he had no right to wear. I did not know if the rumors were true. I still do not know, but I knew that the man I heard weeping in that chamber was human, was capable of grief and love and pain. Whatever sins he had committed, whatever crimes history would lay at his feet, he was not simply a monster. Now his corpse is slung over a horse's back, naked and degraded, proof that the monster is dead. The procession begins moving toward Leicester. I follow at a distance, limping on my damaged leg. Other survivors join the grim parade, some wounded, some simply lost, all of us swept along in the wake of defeat. As we walk, I see men pointing at Richard's body, laughing. Some spit on the corpse as it passes. Others make obscene gestures. One soldier, drunk on victory or wine or both, strikes the hanging body with a stick, making it swing. I look away. I cannot watch. My king, my lord, the man I swore to serve, reduced to a spectacle for the entertainment of his enemies. We reach Leicester as the sun begins to set. The body is displayed in the Church of the Annunciation, still naked, still covered in wounds, so that anyone who doubts can see that Richard Plantagenet is truly dead. Hundreds of people file past to stare. Some are silent and respectful. Others mock and jeer. I stand in the crowd, anonymous in my torn and blood-stained clothes, and watch them look at my dead king. I memorize every wound, every indignity. Someday, I tell myself, someone should know the truth of what happened here. Not the propaganda of the victors, but what I saw with my own eyes. Outside the church, I hear that Henry Tudor has been crowned. They found Richard's crown, some say in a hawthorn bush, others say it was simply retrieved from the battlefield, and Sir William Stanley placed it on Henry's head. Crown Hill, they are calling the spot. The place where one dynasty ended and another began. 2 days later, I am still in Leicester. I have found shelter in a stable, sleeping in the straw with other wounded soldiers. My ribs are cracked, I am certain, and every breath is pain. But I am alive. Many are not. Richard's body is buried on August 25th, 3 days after the battle. The ceremony is perfunctory, almost insulting in its brevity. He is interred at Greyfriars Church, a Franciscan friary, with no royal honours, no elaborate tomb. Just a plain grave and a few prayers spoken by monks who never knew him. I do not attend. I cannot bear to watch them bury him like a pauper, this king who wore his crown into battle and died fighting for his throne. Instead, I sit in the stable and try to make sense of what I witnessed. The battle replays in my mind over and over. Richard's charge, the moment when the Stanleys turned, the sound of weapons striking his unprotected head, his body slung over a horse like meat to market. What haunts me most is not the violence. I had been trained to expect that, prepared for the brutality of war. What haunts me is the speed with which everything changed. One moment, Richard was King of England, leading his household knights in a charge that might have won the day. The next, he was a corpse in the mud, his crown on another man's head, his dynasty extinguished. 300 years of Plantagenet rule ended in perhaps 20 minutes of fighting. The House of York, which had seemed so strong under Edward IV, destroyed by internal betrayal and shifting loyalties. All the oaths, all the promises of fealty, all the elaborate structures of power and obligation, meaningless when fortune turned. I think about Sir William Stanley, watching from his hill while the battle raged, calculating the moment to strike. I think about Lord Stanley, who kept his forces neutral until his brother made the choice for both of them. I think about the Earl of Oxford, fighting fiercely for the Lancastrian cause. I think about Richard, who trusted that the sacred bond between king and subject would hold, who believed that men would honor their oaths. He was wrong, or perhaps he knew he was wrong, but fought anyway, because a king cannot show doubt, cannot reveal weakness, cannot run from his enemies. On my third day in Leicester, a man comes to the stable. He wears Tudor livery and carries a list of names. "You fought for the tyrant," he says. "It is not a question." "I served King Richard," I reply carefully. "The tyrant," he repeats. "King Henry has shown mercy to those who fought under compulsion. Those who renounce the usurper and swear loyalty to the rightful king will be pardoned." He thrusts a parchment at me. It is a loyalty oath, dense with legal language, essentially requiring me to declare that Richard was never the true king, that Henry Tudor's claim is just and lawful, that I will serve the new regime without reservation. I stare at the document. This is the price of survival, denying everything I witnessed, everything I believed, calling my king a tyrant and a usurper, swearing loyalty to the man whose forces killed him. I think of Richard's words. "Loyalty is worth more than gold. A man who stands when others flee is worth 10, who fight only when victory is certain." But Richard is dead. The Plantagenets are finished. And I am 23 years old, with no family, no position, no prospects. If I refuse this oath, I will be executed or imprisoned. If I sign it, I live. "I need time," I say. The man shrugs. "You have until tomorrow. After that, your name goes on a different list." He leaves. I sit in the straw, holding the parchment, reading the words again and again. That night, I walk through Leicester. The city is celebrating. Banners in Tudor colors hang from windows. People drink in the streets, toasting the new king. Musicians play in the market square. It is as if the last 2 years never happened, as if Richard's reign was just a bad dream now ended. I find myself at Greyfriars Church. The friary is quiet. the monks at evening prayers. I slip into the church and stand before the plain stone that marks Richard's grave. There is no inscription yet, no memorial. Just a rectangular slab in the floor. I kneel, not because I am religious, though I was raised to fear God and honor the church, but because I do not know what else to do. Words fail me. Prayers seem inadequate. What can I say to a dead king that would matter? "I'm sorry," I whisper finally. "I'm sorry I could not reach you. I'm sorry I survived when you did not. I'm sorry that I am not brave enough to refuse their oath and join you in death." The stone offers no answers. The dead do not speak, no matter what the priests say about souls and salvation. I remember the last moment I saw Richard's face clearly, before the helmet came off, before the killing blows. It was during the charge, when we first broke through the enemy lines. He turned in his saddle to check that his men were following, and for an instant, our eyes met. He was grinning, fierce and wild and almost joyful, a man who had accepted what was coming, who had made his choice and would live or die by it. In that moment, he looked free, freed from the weight of the crown, the paranoia of kingship, the endless calculations of power and betrayal. He was simply a warrior in battle, doing what warriors do. I wonder if he knew, in that moment, that he was riding toward his death. I wonder if he cared. I stand and walk out of the church. Tomorrow I will sign their oath. I will swear loyalty to Henry Tudor. I will call Richard a usurper and a tyrant, because those are the words required for survival. I will bend my knee to the new regime and try to find a place in the world it is creating. But I will remember. I will remember what I saw on that field near Market Bosworth. I will remember a king who wore his crown into battle and died fighting rather than fleeing. I will remember the sound of William Stanley's forces crashing into our flank, the cry of treason that echoed across the field. I will remember Richard's body stripped and degraded, paraded through Leicester as proof that the monster was dead. And someday, when enough time has passed that it is safe to speak, I will tell what I witnessed. Not the propaganda of victors, but the truth of what happened when the last Plantagenet fell. The next morning, I sign the oath. My hand does not shake. I have made my choice, just as Richard made his. We both did what we had to do to survive. Or, in his case, to die as a king rather than live as a fugitive. The man who collects my oath nods with satisfaction. "Welcome to the service of King Henry," he says. I say nothing. There is nothing to say. In the months that follow, I learn what happened to the others. The Duke of Norfolk died on the battlefield, as I suspected. Sir Richard Ratcliffe was killed in Richard's final stand. Sir Robert Brackenbury was captured and executed. Lord Stanley and his brother William were rewarded lavishly, lands, titles, positions of power in the new regime. The Earl of Oxford became Henry's closest military advisor. Henry Tudor married Elizabeth of York in January 1486, uniting the houses of Lancaster and York, symbolically ending the Wars of the Roses. The White Rose and the Red Rose became the Tudor Rose. England, exhausted by decades of civil war, accepted the new dynasty with what seemed like relief. Richard became the villain of official history. Tudor propagandists painted him as a monster, hunchbacked, twisted in body and soul, murderer of innocents, tyrant overthrown by righteous rebellion. Some of it may have been true, some of it certainly was not. But truth matters less than the story the victors choose to tell. I find work as a clerk in a merchant's house in London. It is humble employment for someone of my background, but I am grateful for it. I marry, I have children, I grow old. The years pass, and the world changes. Richard's grave at Greyfriars is eventually marked with a modest memorial, but it is nothing like the elaborate royal tombs at Westminster. When the friary is dissolved during the Reformation, decades after my death, his remains will be lost, scattered, forgotten. England will move on, but I do not forget. On August 22nd of every year, I go to church and light a candle, not for the tyrant of Tudor propaganda, but for the man I knew, the king who valued loyalty above gold, the warrior who wore his crown into battle, the man who chose to die fighting rather than surrender or flee. I am an old man now, writing this account by candlelight in my small room. My children think I am mad, dwelling on events from 60 years past. Perhaps I am, but I was there. I saw it happen, and before I die, I want someone to know what I witnessed. Bosworth Field was not a glorious victory of good over evil. It was a brutal, chaotic clash of ambition and fear, where loyalty shifted with the wind, and thousands of men died for causes they barely understood. Richard was not a monster, but neither was he a saint. He was a man, flawed, desperate, paranoid perhaps, but also brave and committed to the end. He died on August 22, 1485, in a muddy marsh near Market Bosworth, surrounded by enemies, fighting to the last breath. His white courser, that magnificent warhorse that carried him into his final charge, was later given to Henry Tudor as a prize of war. His crown was found in a hawthorn bush, or simply on the field, depending on who tells the story, and placed on another man's head. His body was stripped, degraded, displayed, and buried with minimal ceremony in a grave that would eventually be lost to time. The Plantagenet dynasty, which had ruled England since 1154, died with him. The Wars of the Roses, which had torn the kingdom apart for 30 years, ended in that moment when William Stanley's forces struck our flank and Richard's army dissolved. I survived. I bent my knee to the victors. I swore oaths I did not believe. I built a life in the New England that Henry Tudor created. But I never forgot the sound of my king dying in the mud, or the sight of his naked corpse slung over a horse's back, or the speed with which everything I had believed in collapsed. They say that fortune is a wheel, always turning, raising men up and casting them down. I saw that wheel turn on Bosworth Field. I saw a king become a corpse in the space of minutes. I saw a dynasty die and another begin. I saw loyalty rewarded with power and betrayal punished with death. Or was it the reverse? In the chaos of that day, it became impossible to tell. What I know for certain is this. On August 22nd, 1485, I watched the last Plantagenet fall. I heard his cry of treason as the Stanleys turned against him. I saw him fight on foot in the marsh, surrounded by enemies, refusing to flee. I saw the halberds and swords descend, again and again, until he fell and did not rise. And I saw his body treated with a cruelty that haunts me still. Not because I loved Richard, I barely knew him truly, but because he was the king I swore to serve, and I failed him. I could not reach him in time. I could not die at his side as a loyal squire should. I survived when he did not, and I spent the rest of my life trying to reconcile that survival with the oaths I had taken. Was Richard a good king? I cannot say. His reign was too short, too consumed by rebellion and paranoia for me to judge fairly. Was he the monster his enemies painted him as? No. He was a man caught in an impossible situation, fighting to hold a crown that half the kingdom rejected, surrounded by potential traitors, desperate enough to wear his crown into battle and charge across a field toward his enemy in a final gamble for victory. He lost that gamble, but he lost it fighting, not fleeing. That, at least, is something. When they bury me, and that day is not far off now, I feel it in my bones. I will carry the memory of Bosworth Field to my grave, the smell of gunpowder and blood, the thunder of hooves, the crash of armies colliding, Richard's white horse struggling in the marsh, the moment when Stanley's forces appeared on the hillside, the sound of weapons striking bare flesh, the sight of a king's corpse paraded through the streets. I will carry it all, and perhaps in whatever comes after death I will find Richard again and tell him that I tried to reach him, that I wanted to stand at his side, that I am sorry I was not brave enough or strong enough or fast enough to die with him. But I did not die. I lived. I signed their oath and bent my knee and built a life in Tudor England. And now, at the end, I set down this account so that someone, someday, might know what truly happened when the last Plantagenet fell. There is a sound a king makes when he dies. I heard it once, on a summer morning in Leicestershire, and I have never forgotten it. The wet crunch of steel on bone, the wheeze of air escaping from punctured lungs, the roar of enemies sensing victory, the silence that follows when a man who wore a crown lies still in the mud. That sound is the end of an age. That sound is history turning. That sound is the last gasp of Plantagenet England, drowned out by the triumphant cries of Tudor soldiers and the hoofbeats of horses carrying a naked corpse toward Leicester.
I heard it. I witnessed it. I survived it. And now I have told it, for whatever that is worth. May God have mercy on Richard's soul. May God have mercy on all of us who fought that day, whether we served the Rose of York or the Dragon of Wales. And may God have mercy on me for outliving my king and spending 60 years trying to forget the sight of him dying in the mud while I lay helpless, watching, unable to save him or join him in death. This is my testimony. This is what I saw. This is the truth of Bosworth Field, as witnessed by Thomas Ferrers, squire in the household of King Richard III, last of the Plantagenet line. He died fighting. That, at least, no one can take from him.